Hello and welcome to this episode of Political Adda. We are looking today at the leaked findings of the caste census as the Karnataka government is yet to officially release the report and the impact it would have politically and otherwise. Joining us is Dr. Harish Ramaswamy, who has spent over around 3 decades teaching political science at Mysuru University, then at Karnataka University, Dharwad, and is also the first VC of Raichur University. Welcome to the print, sir.
Thank you.
We also have my colleague and senior associate editor, Sharan Povana, who's also joining us from Karnataka. He covers the state for us. Apart from doing political stories, there are other issues related to the policy, the government that he keeps tracking. Thanks for joining in, Sharan. Well, my first question to you, Dr. Ramaswamy, what are the national implications of releasing the data? Or is this a very state specific phenomenon? Because, Rahul Gandhi has often talked about it.
Yeah, in the sense, because Mr. Rahul Gandhi has spoken, this has the national implication. Otherwise, if you look at the real condition of this caste issue, caste dimension within Karnataka, this is much more a state phenomenon. And that's the reason why you find that, the state politicians are so very perplexed and disturbed because of the caste census that they're talking about. Although, by nomenclature, the whole census is called as the socio-economic and educational evaluation of the census.
Right.
I mean, there are a couple of things. So one is, this was done in 2015 by Siddaramaiah. So he's waited 10 years. Now, I want to know why he waited 10 years, and I want to know why he's chosen, at this point in time of his political career. Or, I mean, what is the significance of the timing for holding on for 10 years and releasing it now, sir?
Actually, there is no timing that he has waited for. In fact, he was very keen on having this for the policy support system. Because once you have the number in place, then you would know where you're going to spend your money, from the state exchequer. But what actually happened was, although it was commissioned in 2015, the government had lost its, credibility, and then the BJP government came into power, and then again, when Congress came back to power, they thought they should have this. But at the same time, by then, Congress opposition leader had already spoken about the need for caste census, and therefore it had become a national issue. And when Mr. Siddaramaiah thought of bringing this before the cabinet, people thought that this is an opportunistic exercise that Mr. Siddaramaiah is doing because on the waiting list is Mr. DK Shivkumar as the chief minister, because there was an agreement, I suppose, which has been politically discussed, that 2.5 years Mr. Siddaramaiah would be the chief minister, and followed by that would be Shivkumar. And therefore, the political implications are read into what are the possibilities and how the Congress government is going to manage this. But according to me, as an academic, I wouldn't find that there is anything called timing in deciding about when to take this up.
So, do you think that him releasing it now, because the people we speak to say that it's finally time that Siddaramaiah has said that this is his last elections, and so now the BJP High Command may actually be thinking of a change of guard. Whether it's DK Shivkumar or somebody else is the next question. But if they are thinking of a change of guard, do you think that the caste census sort of insulates Siddaramaiah to a certain extent, sir? Because a backward classes chief minister, can he be replaced by a dominant classes chief minister? So those kind of questions, sir.
No, basically, if you look at Mr. Siddaramaiah's political career, you understand that he comes from a Gopal Gowda school, which is a socialistic background. And he has always spoken about the need for social justice and redistribution of wealth, etc., etc. And therefore, when Mr. Siddaramaiah came to power, he used the opportunity to see that he does maximum to the class which doesn't have the opportunities. In a way, he was a subaltern kind of a chief minister who tried to look at the working class, who tried to look at the poorer classes, and he tried to look at those who did not have opportunities. Now, when he thinks like that and then he has built his career based on those kinds of thinking, people would understand that when he takes power in his hand, he would definitely do something good for the people. And he happens to be an OBC man. And he himself has gone through, that's what he always argues, although I don't see him going through that kind of a problem. So, it is not a question of timing, but it's more of an ideological mooring that Mr. Siddaramaiah has in terms of looking at the caste census to see that the power, political power, is redistributed and the opportunities are exercised for the benefit of all those who are the most unfortunate people.
Right. Dr. Ramaswamy, I've already spoken about this, the Rahul Gandhi factor. He has been a strong advocate for caste census. But in a state like Karnataka, do you think they have opened up Pandora's box and sort of made life more difficult for themselves? Or is there some benefit that they see in carrying out this exercise?
See, if you try to read Karnataka politics, it's very clear that Karnataka politics originated with the Vokkaligas coming to power. I go back to 1956 when the reorganization took place. And there were a lot of rumors that the reorganization would bring in a lot of Lingaites into the political arena. And therefore, there was a clash between the Vokkaligas and the Lingaites. But basically, if you read academically, you would understand that there were already M.N. Srinivas who floated the theory of dominant castes in Karnataka. And followed by that, of course, Mr. V.K. Nataraj and many people wrote about how the whole idea of caste system works in politics. And the psychology was built in such a way that it is the dominant caste which actually take the advantage. And what is dominant caste? If you look at the dominant caste, they are the advantage culturally, and those are the communities which had the economic advantage, and they also come from the agricultural background. So the psyche was very clear that the politics of Karnataka would be balanced between the Vokkaligas and the Lingaites. And to add to this was the question of number. People did not have the caste census. So they thought this is the way the politics of Karnataka would go, but it did not go that way. If you look at how Arsu came to be the chief minister, he comes from a very minority community. But when Arsu came to power, Arsu also thought that he should go in for the caste census. Now, by that time, historically in India, at the central government level, there were already caste, enumerations. Kalekar's, work has been cited quite often. And then, of course, Mandal and so many backward class movements and other things that have already happened. So there was already the history prevailing. And when Mr. Siddaramaiah started talking about this issue, and then there was a leaked statistics, the numerical number of Muslims, the numerical number of the backward communities, OBCs, all these things started coming to the fore, the scheduled caste also. Now, there are two things that are happening here which we need to observe. Vokkaliga, although calls themselves as a monolithic community, it also has some breakup and even communities. But when it comes to Lingayat movement of the 12th century, you find that there was already a community that was existing called the Lingayats, and then you find that there was, after the movement, many smaller communities joined this community. Now, their objection is that in the enumeration of this socio-economic and educational backwardness, these people have been identified by their subcastes. And if these subcastes come into the fore, then the monolithic idea of a Lingayat community would lose their number. Whereas the similar thing, if it happens with the OBCs and backward communities, those communities which were splinter groups, they will come into the mainstream politics, which makes the OBC the larger number. So the Veerashaiva versus Lingayat was a 1980 discourse, where the Veerashaivas felt that they were the dissidents of the Lingayatism, whereas the Lingayatism came in the 12th century, and they started saying that they would oppose all the Brahminical ways of thinking or the Vedic ways of thinking, and therefore they had their own splinter groups. Now, this numerical variation is what is actually bothering the political game. And many people are worried that the dominant nature of these two communities, the Vakaligas and the Lingayats, is likely to be lost when it comes to holding the power of the state. And it is possible that logically, the scheduled caste, which is in the largest number, or the Muslims who are about 13% now, may stake their claim in terms of the political dividends. If they start claiming the political dividends, then the dividend that these people are already enjoying would be lost. So the conflict of interest is what is actually bothering these people.
So, I mean, you just spoke about dominant castes and vocaligas, how so far they've had sort of, at least it's believed that they've had a disproportionate, this one to, of power, benefit of power so far. But how did they even come about establishing the narrative that they are dominant, sir? And how did they come about with these numbers, that the believed numbers that we've had so far, that they were 17% or they were 14, vocaligas were 14? How did they even build that narrative, and how were the other communities, how did they accept these numbers, sir?
See, before Hamnoor Commission in the 70s came, there were no caste census. And the political narrative and the academic narratives were trying to talk in terms of how Karnataka has been divided into two parts. The southern part being dominated by the Vakaligas and the northern part being dominated by the Lingayats. So naturally, the academic discourses which were built around this made people believe that there were two dominant castes which were actually holding. How did they decide about the dominant caste? It is based on the land holding. Who is the panchayat chairman, who was the jamindar. If you go and look into the British history also, you find that these communities were the agrarian communities, and because they were agrarian communities, they had enormous amount of land. And those were the days when the talukas were very huge, unlike these districts. For example, today a district has only about 60 kilometers distance from the border of a district to the headquarters. But those days it was more than 200 or 300 kilometers. And each taluka, especially in the northern Karnataka, was twice the size of a district in Mysore or Bangalore. So you find that the land holding was the prominent mechanism through which they identified these castes. And what happened post the Mysore Legislative Assembly, where during Vishweshwaraya's and Jayachamrajendra Vadeyar's period, the politics involved the rural people. Earlier, there was a segregation. Only the urban politicians, urban people who had the land or house and other qualifications were the members of the MRA. That is the Mysore Representative Assembly. But then when it shifted to the rural areas, people started pouring into politics, and the ROI of politics, the return on investment of politics, grew. And these were the two dominant communities, and many other communities, backward class communities as we call, are the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, in the post-independence period to almost 1980, were completely devoid of any opportunity to get into the mainstream politics. So the domination of these two castes in politics, the way they conducted themselves, and the number of legislators who were elected from these constituencies, unless the constituencies were divided into the reserved constituencies, were all in a way dominated by these two majority communities. And therefore, the whole narrative, both academically and politically, actually commensurated, saying that, okay, this is how it has to be accepted. Even the Western scholars tried to look at the whole Karnataka politics from that perspective. That is where this issue comes.
Right. Well, Dr. Ramaswamy, one important issue to consider is, and that one wonders about, is whether caste trump party affiliations in Karnataka. What do you think?
If you are looking at caste being the basis of a political party, I wouldn't agree with it, because in both the parties, which are called the national parties, or a party like a Janata Party, probably to a certain extent, I would agree, is dominated by the Vakaligas, the Janata Party. But otherwise, Congress and BJP both had all the communities. But naturally, Congress, because it was in the national movement and post-national movement also, it was kind of a social movement. Social mobility was promoted by Congress, and the Congress left-centric ideology. All these things made Congress much more secular in its outlook, and people had joined Congress, not just as a political party, but as a social movement. Whereas when BJP came to power, BJP always had behind it RSS, and RSS was always seen as a Brahminical party or Brahminical organization. And therefore, the implications of BJP coming to power, it was seen as a upper caste party. But if you speak the truth and then break the party and see, there are hardly few Brahmins, but then most of them are either Lingayats or Vakayas. But then they are also considered as the upper caste, because upper caste definition also goes with the hierarchy of caste, the economic position, the socio-economic and educational priorities that they have, and the way they were running the state. So many factors actually contributed. It's quite complicated, but unless in a small interview, probably we may not be able to break into all these things. But there are a number of literature which one can read, especially about Karnataka. And I have also written a book on Karnataka government politics, which talks about these issues.
So, we've spoken about Lingayats and Vokalikas, how they've dominated the narrative. But do you think that, since let's say the 1980, in the last 20 to 30 years, there have been smaller castes who have asserted themselves either through the setting up of mathas or monasteries. Siddaramaiah's own community, the Kurubas, are now a formidable force in Karnataka. So, in a way, has Siddaramaiah challenged the dominant census as well as given a platform for everyone else to sort of come up and stake their claims, sir?
No, actually, the credit should go to Mr. Aras, Devaraj Aras. It was Devaraj Aras who brought the land reforms. In other words, whoever tills the land is the owner of the land. And this principle of land reforms actually brought in a lot of change. And it was during his period again, he tried to eradicate the slavery at the agrarian level. Now, who were the agrarian laborers? Most of the agrarian laborers were coming from the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe communities, and also from the OBCs. And now you see the land which was owned mostly by the Brahmins, most of the Brahmins were working outside the land. They were either the urbaners, they had settled in urban areas, and they were having the white collar jobs. Now, those who were tilling the land were these people. And when the land reforms was brought in, you can clearly see that in the southern region of Karnataka, the land reforms were very effectively implemented. And therefore, the land transferred. And when the land was transferred, empowerment started happening. Whereas in case of North Karnataka, the land empowerment did not happen as much as it happened in southern Karnataka, for the simple reason that relatives of those landholding, they got the dividends. They were divided amongst those people, and they showed that they did not have that much of land. And also, we must always be careful in seeing all these things, because the reach of Bangalore did not cross Davanagar in those days. The middle Karnataka, the central Karnataka, and therefore the North Karnataka was also considered as a backward area, which is called as the Kittur Karnataka now. And later on, of course, the Kalyan Karnataka also suffered because it had come from Hyderabad region. And both were under the feudal lords. And fortunately or unfortunately, during the British rule, even the region which is called as the Kittur Karnataka was under the British of Mumbai Karnataka. And Mumbai was the province. And this was the backyard for the British. So you find that the development was also hit by these two regions. And therefore, the only region that was amenable for development was the southern region. And therefore, when the empowerment took place, when they had land holding, as Dr. B.R. Ambedkar has said, that the owner becomes, the owning, leads him to get empowered. And that led to the empowerment of most of these smaller communities. And when they were brought into the mainstream, once again, we must go back to Janata Dal, Gopal Gowda, and socialistic movement, and the Congress, because it was Congress which tried to bring all these people during the national movement. And these are the people who brought them and empowered them and then brought them into the mainstream of politics. And that led to the rise of the OBCs, the rise of the scheduled caste, the rise of other communities, STs, everybody in politics. And that is how the equation started tilting.
So is Siddaramaiah building on the same legacy, sir? As in, bringing a coalition of backward classes, Ahinda is anyways taking. It was believed that Devraj Aras was Ahinda plus it was anti-Lingayats, but not. It was probably plus Vokkaligas. But is Siddaramaiah now bringing a pure play Ahinda only, sir? Is that his politics?
No. Arsu cannot be anti-Lingayat. Arsu himself was a community which is a smaller community amongst the Lingayats. They actually resemble like Lingayats. But, Arsu was much more a balanced politician. It is said that he always slept with Prince under his bed. Prince is a book written by one of the greatest politicians. And then he always read that. That means he was very strategistic in his politics. And Arsu, when he brought these communities to, empower them, Arsu saw that he started to build that party. But then, of course, Arsu fell against Mrs. Gandhi and got separated and tried to start his own political party, and that was the end of Arsu. I mean, Arsu himself writes about all those things in his own book. That's a different thing. But the gap that existed post Arsu was the area where Siddaramaiah, who was in Janata Party, had to leave because of the Deve Gowda and his family, because they wouldn't allow any other person to grow. And when he moved away from Janata Party and joined Congress, he filled in the gap that was existing. And he tried to promote his thinking, which was once again a left-centric and pro-poor kind of a thinking. Even today, if you make a lot of academic studies that you can read research papers, we find that there is 66% of support for this left-centric ideology in India, because there is poverty, because there is conditions of land holding, and therefore you find that there is a mobility which Siddaramaiah took advantage and seized the opportunity to represent himself as the leader of those communities.
Yeah, Dr. Ramaswamy, moving away from Karnataka, my question is more from a national perspective. Well, one of the arguments that a number of political experts give is that to counter the so-called Hindutva ideology that the BJP focuses on, the Congress under Rahul Gandhi has been, talking about caste. So, which is where the caste census and all that comes into play. And if you look at the 2024 Lok Sabha election, it did sort of, help them. This is one of the main focus area. This was one of the main focus area of their entire election. How do you look at that? The Hindutva ideology versus the caste, and in that sense, he's trying to position his politics.
I'm not surprised by what you are trying to analyze. Because when Hindutva is dominantly taking place and the time is right for the Hindus to come and consolidate themselves under a good leadership, which is very vocal and very communicative, and the success of the party is also resounding, you find that you had to find an alternate path. And also, organizationally, Congress was becoming weak. And you also see, unfortunately, many of the best brains have left Congress. And the Congress leadership itself is struggling because it cannot make good decisions. And the power is centered around the family, and they are not able to leave that and then hand it over to the next generation. So there are a number of issues which are actually seen very clearly. And at that point of time, what is your salvation? So the salvage was to take up the caste issue. But is it going to pay you? There are two things here. If you look at the development politics of BJP is not addressing the development politics, leaving aside these communities. At least representatively, they have already made a ST the president of this country, and they have brought OBC. The Prime Minister himself is belonging to OBC, and he has given community representation, and now he is talking about the Muslims also, trying to support the Muslim cause. Now, if that is the kind of politics that we are seeing, although what I am saying is very simplistic, the impact of all these things is seen on a party which is trying to realign itself on the caste lines, but not on the left-centric ideology. Now, if you talk about caste, divide of poverty, divide of the land holding, divide of reallocation of the wealth, divide of the opportunities, divide of the equal, share. Now, you are only talking about an empty caste system, which is not existing as a system at all. Therefore, you find that there are a lot of weaknesses in the arguments which Mr. Gandhi is making. And if you question Mr. Gandhi, have you actually made a difference in this? Your party is in power in certain states. Have you actually made or brought a lot of OBCC to the mainstream? What is his answer? Because he never had a power. Within the party also, he has not been able to do those things. So, it is one thing to be rhetorically very communicative and expressive, but on the other side, you have a party which is now well-oiled, well-grown, has an excellent reach, and has money, and ideologically, as well as if you look at the slogan-wise, they are reaching out to everybody. What is wrong with it? Everybody has his own time in politics.
Right.
So, you know, we'll wrap this up soon, sir. So let me first remind our viewers that what we're discussing is the leaked findings of the caste census. There is no official data that the government or anyone has authenticated. The data still remains with them. These are all data that we have received through our sources. So there's no way of finding out whether, unless it's released officially, we don't know. But sir,
True.
with Siddaramaiah now having, however the data has come to the media, it has. Now, does this sort of cement his position as a chief minister? How has he insulated himself, sir, or has he exposed himself to, sort of more targeting? Because now as the data stands or the leaked finding stands, there's a lot of angst against him. Everyone's up in arms against him. So, how do you think this plays out in the next few days, sir?
I mean, in my opinion, uh, while we are talking about the hypothetical data that we have, everything, I would believe that Siddaramaiah has hurt himself more in Buddha rather than in this caste play. Because in caste play, people knew that his ideological moodings were in favor of the OBCs and backward classes, and then he was trying to be the champion of those people and trying to fill the gap of Mr. Aras. And therefore, people would accept his arguments at that level. But the question is in terms of the methodological errors, or in terms of the numerical numbers, which will be revealed at a later stage. If they are wrong, then his position will be delegated. But is it connected to his insulation of being and continuing as a chief minister? I have my own doubts, because that is much more left to the party high command. And therefore, when the party high command decides, these changes will take place. But he is, I'm sure, quite comfortable with all these caste issues going around him, because he is in the media, and then his name is coming up time and again. He is throwing himself as a champion, and others who are actually fighting him are trying to be isolating themselves and regulated by their own caste groups. And this is a threat for Mr. Shivkumar, because that is why Shivkumar is not saying that I am a Vokkaliga leader and I am going to take care of the interests of the Vokkaligas. On the contrary, he is trying to say that everyone is going to get justice. He is trying to prove himself that he is a man of the masses and not of Vokkaligas alone. Now, this is
Well,
the
thank
conflict that
you.
is going on right now.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Harish Ramaswamy, for taking out time and sharing your valuable insight. Thank you, Sharon, for the leaked report.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much for inviting me.